Hi, Apostolos.
Hello, how are you?
Kalimera.
Apostolos.
Nice to see you, Maria.
Hi, hi.
Nice to see you.
Long time, long time.
Ages ago, ages ago.
We have to do this in presence, not online.
Yes, yes, definitely, definitely. We shouldn't do it again as a hybrid, only in person next time.
Yes, yes. I
Next
agree.
time in the metaverse. Not in presence, in the metaverse.
Okay, I'm going to start the. It is already started. So we were talking to everyone in the YouTube, but no problem, I think. Let me see if we are.
I don't think the YouTube video started yet.
No?
Yes, it started, yes.
It started?
Yes, yes, yes.
Do I have to, it says here there's a countdown, 1 minute 30.
You have to make a refresh because I can see myself talking. Okay.
All right. Sure.
Okay. And Alexander, can you see the chat in the YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, okay, because I cannot see it. I don't know why. But if you can, it's perfect. So Mónica, when you are ready, you can start.
Yeah, it's 2 minutes to the time. I don't know.
Yes, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better to wait 2 minutes.
Apostolos, can you share the screen? Not now, but just to see if everything is in order. You can kind of, you know how to do it, yeah?
It is possible. It is possible. It's open. I can share.
Yes. Okay. Good.
When the time is
due. We'll do that later. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Excellent. And well, we'll start at 10:30 spot, and then. Okay, so welcome everybody to the first plenary session of the Strings Conference. Today, I am Mónica Truninger, by the way. I am from the Institute of Social Sciences of the University of Lisbon. I'm a food sociologist as a background, and I'm also the co-PI of the String Project together with Elisabete Figueiredo. So today we have a fantastic plenary, fantastic speakers, 3 great speakers. The way how I will organize this session, I will give a short presentation of each of the speakers, and then they will have the possibility to bring their ideas for around 20 minutes. And then at the end, we'll do a discussion. And so I would really appreciate if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and then someone will pick those questions and send them to me, and then I'll, at the end, around half an hour before the end of the session, we'll have a nice discussion and questions and answers from the panel. So the first speaker is Apostolos Papadopoulos, and he's a professor in rural sociology and geography at Harokopio, University of Athens. He has lots of experience in terms of organizing and coordinating research activities, been a project leader, works also as senior researcher in several research projects funded not only by the European Commission, but also the Greek state and other organizations. He has an enormous amount of publications, so please look at his CV. But currently, he's the editor-in-chief of the international peer-reviewed journal Sociologia Ruralis between 2020 and 2023. And also he's associate editor of the journal New Medit, Mediterranean Journal of Economics, Agriculture and Environment. The next speaker that we have is Maria Fonte. She's a professor at the American University of Rome in Italy. She has extensive experience in research and teaching on topics in the field of rural sociology and agricultural economics. She also has quite a lot of experience in terms of the coordination of research projects, including different European countries. And her publications span across biotechnological, the agri-biotechnological revolution, the turn to quality in agriculture, the role of local knowledge in agriculture and rural development, the beautiful project that she has conducted, Corazon, from what I remember, territorial policies of rural development, and models of food consumption, civic food networks, and local food. And our last speaker is Elisabete Figueiredo. She's the chair of this conference, the coordinator of the project, so you know her quite well, I hope, and she's a sociologist with a PhD in environmental sciences. She's an associate professor with habilitation at the Department of Social, Political and Territorial Sciences of the University of Aveiro, and also full researcher in GovCop. She has a wide range of interests, an expert in rural sociology and rural studies, now also working with food, which is great, food studies, environmental sociology, sustainable development, rural tourism studies, and social perception of risk. She also has quite a long experience of coordination of several national and EU-funded research projects as coordinator, as a member of the research team. And she's the coordinator of strings here. So we will start with the Apostolos. You'll have about 20 minutes, and the talk is the title of the talk is Transformative Rural Urban Mobilities and the Sustainability of Food Systems. And when you are about 5 minutes to 20, I will let you know so that you are aware of the time. So you can share the screen now. Thank you, Apostolos.
Thank you, Mónica. I would like to thank you for the invitation to share with you my thoughts and my ideas about this very interesting topic, which is very interesting, of the conference and also of the project. And I think that you allowed me, by inviting me to this panel, to think again of the basic ideas which connect and rethink them, rather, connect the discussion on transformation, rural transformation and food systems. So I will share, I hope that you can see it.
Perfectly,
if it's possible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah?
Everything is in order.
Okay, thank you so much. Let me say first, before I start, that because of the wide range of the themes to be discussed, my presentation will be elliptic. I cannot be very detailed in all the things I'm going to mention, but please feel free to ask or try to tell me which things at the end need more elaboration and discussed. So during discussion, we'll have more time to elaborate some of the ideas. So the basic rationale of my paper is that the rural-urban divide should be seen on the one hand as depicting inequalities and differences across urban and rural space, but also when discussing differences and inequalities, we cannot neglect the changing relationships between rural and urban areas. My aim is to shed more light and highlight the entanglements between rural-urban mobilities on the one hand and the sustainability of food systems on the other, of course, in the European context. And in my understanding, I always bear in mind that agri-food networks are practiced by both movers and non-movers, I mean locals and people who move in space, while there is an interaction between intersecting trajectories of those people. So my discussion is based on a relational understanding of space. And by saying relational, I mean thinking of rural spaces as reconstituting, negotiating, and hybridizing. And let me start by saying a few things very briefly on the rural-urban divide. We think, all of us as rural sociologists, geographers, or people who speak about rural studies, we always think of the differences between urban and rural areas. And in most of the cases, we recognize the different socioeconomic conditions and dynamics behind these two types of social space. And of course, there is a stereotypical aspect of this rural-urban divide, but also we are reminded that these distinctions, differences, always change. That we always have new types of divisions, differences, and asymmetries in place. And the rural-urban divide also, and this is a more recent discussion having to do with the political economy and with the politics. There is a rural-urban divide within the EU concerning the structure of political representation, and which involves a number of issues which are considered to be particularly divisive in the European public discourses in recent times. Most of these discourses have started at the time of the economic crisis. And I'm just reminding you 3 papers, which are, of course, I'm not going to go deep into this discussion, but just mentioning it, that the rural-urban divide is also politicized. We have the events of the places that don't matter. We have a geography of the EU discontent, and we have the erasure of the political trust in the places that don't matter. So we have a regional aspect of rural-urban. So having said that, I think a lot of discussion is due on the concept of rural-urban relationship, which emerged as a way to challenge the long-standing and persistent dichotomies between cities and the countryside. But also this relationship has to do with how to see the spatial and functional interdependencies between the urban and the rural. And here I have 2 quotes. I mentioned Soja, who is very well known recently for his spatial justice book, Seeking Spatial Justice. But at the time that he started his career, he was a rural geographer. And at that time, he said, speaking about rural and urban relationships, he said that to identify and promote a distinctively rural geography without explicitly highlighting the systemic interrelationships between rural areas and the urban matrix runs the risk of becoming trivial, misdirected, and perhaps even detrimental to future research undertakings. So there is a prerequisite to see the relationships. That doesn't mean that we negate, we absolve the divide. And of course, I mentioned also the recent attempts in terms of the economic development and policy making to see rural areas and urban areas as increasingly interdependent in a number of domains. And I mentioned here OECD, which has created a conceptual framework to understand the changing urban and rural relationships by using the term functional regions. And functional regions is an interesting concept. Of course, it's a policy-laden concept. And in OECD's jargon, rural areas are parts of these functional regions, but of different types of functional regions. So we have rural areas within a functional urban area, rural areas close to a functional urban area, and remote rural areas. So you can see here again, despite the relationship, we see the urban bias behind this relationship. That's what I would like at least to point out. In such context, rural-urban partnerships are defined through stressing the main functions of urban and rural areas, and different territories face different challenges, but all regions have potential for growth. And in this narrative, different assets of urban and rural areas can potentially complement one another. And here I show you this kind of this figure, elaborated, of course, by OECD, which is on the one hand simplistic, but also it pervades the message, sends the message that there is a unity, there is a tight relationship between urban and rural areas in terms of functions, and of course, in terms of the wider context, social, economic, and political, which allows for these interrelationships to happen. But this is a kind of conceptualization which is important, but in my understanding, not satisfactory, although it allows us to understand some of the functionalities between urban and rural. And the food supply chain is a typical example of the complex rural-urban partnership that involves a set of partners. And in order to take collective actions, levels of government need to be active and work out their strategies and involve intermediate institutions which help to coordinate actors to extract knowledge from the territory and minimize the cost of its transmission or the transmission of knowledge. So we've got a whole construction, and there's a reports by OECD mentioning that even universities, and we see it in practice, that universities, agricultural universities, agricultural departments nowadays are directly involved with farmers and food producers to boost innovation, both in production and marketing, but in different domains of the food supply chain. And this is considered an important step forward. And of course, it is an important step forward. Also, we have countries like the United States, which have involved the state agencies in supporting the creation of food movements, of alliances and coalitions as far as food networks is concerned. And in the European context, we have also at the regional level numerous case studies in which partnerships, rural-urban partnerships, result in production of public goods through territorial branding. And this is a very interesting concept, territorial branding. We have city branding nowadays, but also territorial branding. And there is an alignment of tourist routes, food products, and cultural elements that distinguish the region. And I think these are the narrative which is very important to fully understand its entanglements with the real needs of the territories and the involvement of the different social actors. I would like to challenge the existing linkages and partnerships across rural and urban areas by using the so-called, which is a very, in my understanding, it's a very abstract term, relational understanding of space, which enables rural places to reconstitute, negotiate, and hybridize. These are, of course, again, generalizations, which have to be seen in very specific contexts to understand them and understand what's the relational aspect of space. But again, I refer to Soja, not because that he's a wise guy, but because in the early stages of his career, recognized some the intricacies of rural studies and its connection to urban studies. He also says that it is of utmost importance that rural studies, whatever the disciplines involved, avoid conceptual isolationism and explicitly recognize the wider social, economic, and political context which embraces rural areas. And by saying that, I would like to think of space relationally, which means to understand its constitutive interrelatedness and ensure that we articulate and interpret the various threads and components. And this can be, of course, applied in particular spaces and in particular cases. Doreen Massey's work is pivotal and inspirational in understanding the throw-togetherness of places, the relational construction of the identity of place. We end up, even when we speak about food, we end up by discussing the identity of places, as well as the material and discursive elements of place identity. And curiously, But not surprisingly, Massey's work tries to combat localist and national claims at once, at the same time. On the one hand, on the other hand, she called for retaining an appreciation of the specific and the distinctive without refuting or refusing the parochial. So this is a balance between different understandings of place. And this is also, this discussion is very relevant to localized food. And before I discuss the alternative food networks and speak a little bit about that, I would like to mention what I've introduced in the title as transformative rural urban mobilities, as transformative mobilities, actually. Mobilities and socio-spatial inequalities are closely interwoven. This is very clear from the literature and from research. But the important thing is that their entanglement is not easily deciphered by social scientists. It is not easy to see what's the cause and what's the effect, and when mobility is the cause and when is the effect. Sociologists have used a spatial arsenal like space, socio-spatial inequalities, and spatial mobility, but only more recently, relatively recently. And this is not an old discussion in sociology. Although in sociology, there is a launch of the new mobility paradigm, which initialized a new way of thinking and looking at social phenomena through the lens of movement. But only when we say movement, and when we speak about mobility, of course, we don't speak always about movement. And mobilities are the complex assemblage, and this is a definition which I particularly like because it engulfs the main components of the discussion. It's a complex assemblage of movement, social imaginaries, and experience. And from the start, the mobility approach has emphasized mobility and immobility, moorings, dwelling, stillness, but also speed and liquidity. It's more to understand about movement and non-movement, but not only movement. And mobility cannot be comprehended, of course, without considering the spatial, which involves several aspects. And not all of the spatial categories like scale, borders, and territories are of the same kind. But all of them, of course, are involved in food studies, in the food food systems and in the food networks. In addition, imagined places and territorial imaginaries are important components of mobilities and of people's actions in relation to their movement or non-movement. And having said that, and it's a concept which is thrown into the discussion. It's the concept of territoriality, which is behind the discussion of Massey. And territoriality is a mechanism of power. And when we speak about not about territories, about territoriality, how territorial is formulated, controlled, resisted, or transgressed, and these are political processes. More to the point.
You have more or less 5 minutes.
No. Okay.
Okay.
More to the point, mobility can well be seen as a strategy for bringing about justice across societies and space. And also, when we speak about mobilities, we understood both as an analytical lens and as practice. And when people are mobile, in fact, they negotiate, create, and enter into social locations and arrangements based on power relations. A few words about agri-food systems before I conclude. Agri-food systems are sets of relations affected by complex power dynamics, but their governance is defined by regulatory frameworks, technology, markets, and multi-stakeholder interactions. The landscape of food systems has changed very significantly over the years, while the separations between alternative and conventional food networks has not proven very fruitful in capturing the convolutions of food systems hybridity. I will deal mostly with alternative food networks because they seem to challenge the dominant arrangements of the agri-food systems. And I would like to point out that there are fierce discussions on the alterity of the alternative food systems and what constitutes the alternative in the localized food networks. The arguments in defense of the alterity and quality characteristics of the alternative food systems include the short food supply chains, quality, the construction of quality, and the social embeddedness, but more in-depth discussion is required. And having said that, I would like to remind that also in the literature of local food systems, there is a critique of Born and Parcel about the local trap. That there is a criticism to food activists and researchers who assume, to those ones who assume something inherent about the local scale. And of course, there is a romanticism many times towards the local and the rural, and sometimes there is a defensive localism behind what has to do with the local food systems. And this is the last slide before going to the conclusion. And I would like to sum up some of the new, not say criticisms, but I would say new additions to the discussion of the local food systems. There are different, various calls by different researchers. Most of them can be labeled food justice scholars, who say that we need to reintegrate the various components within the food systems and alternative food networks. Apart from food production, provision, farming, health and safety, we should add labor recruitment and mobility, community building and integration, social integration, even immigration and mobility policies. And there is also, in particular, Allen's call for laborers, immigrants, and the working people, the need for them to be included in the discussion because they are often missing in both theory and practice of agri-food systems. And there has been, and there is also a recent call for challenging the dominant agrarian imaginary of quality local food by integrating farm worker, consumer-based, and solidarity movements. And this is my final remarks. Although I said that at the beginning that I had to be elliptic in order to capture this discussion, one of the concluding remarks is that we need to move beyond the impasse of the prevalent alternative conventional dualism in food systems or alternative food networks by giving more greater application of standard sociological categories of power, class, gender, inequality, and social justice or socio-spatial justice. The agri-food system literature needs to pay more attention to the governance complexity and the socio-political dynamics lying behind. And this is a criticism coming from the planning aspect. The sets of spaces of possibility and progressive senses of place cannot be identified with specific forms of localized food networks, but rather through mobilizing the multifunctional potential of the food system and networks and obtaining higher socio-spatial inclusion and empowerment of the social actors who are involved in the localized food networks. And therefore, the articulation of transformative mobilities and food systems across the urban and rural space enhances our understanding of the rural transformation processes that extend far beyond the rural. But more importantly, we should underline the critical role of human agency and people's claims for socio-spatial justice. And I would like to thank you for your attention.
Interesting, the last slide. Thank you so much, Apostolos. And now I don't know if we have a question, but if you have questions, please put them in the chat and then we'll pick them up at the end. Now we will go to the next speaker, Maria Fonte. She's from the American University of Rome with the title Reconnecting Country and Town Through Food and Gourmet Shops. So Maria, you can share the screen.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, we
Can
can
you
see.
say yes?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Elisabete, for inviting me, for involving me in this very interesting project. It's quite a challenge to speak after Apostolos. We participated together to many research, among which Corazon, the famous Corazon research. So we have quite a similar background, but he's more rural geographer and I'm a more rural sociologist. So we coincide in many of the concepts that he has presented, but I think my presentation will be from a different angle. I will shortly retrace the evolution of the approaches to rurality in the social sciences, especially rural sociology, up to the cultural turn and the conceptualization of a relational rurality, the one Apostolos so well described, and the differentiated countryside. Then I will briefly mention the concept of planetary urbanization and conclude with a few reflections on the role of food as interconnecting rural and urban places, county and town. So it's very complementary to the previous presentation. Since the 1960s, I would say that the concept of rural and rural economy has been highly contested. In his presidential address to the US Rural Sociological Society in 1972, James Cope was saying, there is no rural and there is no rural economy. It's merely our analytical distinction, our rhetorical device. And in 1990, Kit Hogarth was writing, the broad category rural is obfuscatory, since intra-rural differences can be enormous, and rural-urban similarity can be sharp. So the context in which the two authors operated was, of course, very different. James Cope was reacting to a tradition of thinking in terms of dichotomies, where rural and urban represented two different and separated social and economic worlds. Rurality represented the place of community with its unchanging tradition, and sociality determined mostly by personal, affective, informal relations, while urban was represented as represented the heterogeneity of society with its rational division of labor and specialized social role. In this perspective, the rural could be thought either as lagging behind to urban, no infrastructure, no technical progress, for example, or as an ideal, beauty, the world of beauty, order, simplicity, grassroots democracy. In the 1990s, the Modernization Project was already in crisis. Since the 1980s, the European Union went through a progressive reform of its common agricultural policy, and it was clear that there were many rural economies that required differentiated forms of policy interventions. The 1988 communication with the European Commission, The Future of Rural Society, described a countryside differentiated in many typologies. The one also Apostolos mentioned, for example, peri-urban, intermediate, remote. As you see, this category return in time, where agriculture, in this rural economy, agriculture was not anymore the only and not even the most important activity of the economy. At a theoretical level, in the same period, in the shift to globalization, positivist and political economy approaches to rurality have been displaced by post-structuralist and cultural approaches. The rural became a social representation, a category of thought, as Mormont wrote in 1990. The weakening and the rearticulation of social structures in the nation states directed attention to the global flows of people, information, objects. Networks emerged as a useful concept to analyze the new economy's fluid configurations in a vision of endogenous and neo-endogenous rural development. So we have Murdoch, according to whom rurality was better understood following the constellation of social, political, economic networks that differentiated rural spaces. Wood, in 2010, while underlying the interconnection of rural and urban places in the global economy, elaborated the concept of a global countryside, emphasized the capacity of rural places to influence and negotiate their own future. Bettina Bock finally directed attention to marginalized, remote rural areas, highlighting the role of social innovation into a new type of an exogenous rural development, attentive to social inclusion. In all this vision, this is very important, I think, some agency was given back to rural place. They were not anymore passive and dependent, only passive and dependent on rural development. They could negotiate, they became actors. Relational rurality, that is, fits well into the Mediterranean tradition of rurality, where the link between country and town settled around spatial and economic integration rather than separation and conflict, as in the model of the industrial district, for example, where industrialization was diffused in the countryside. But nothing, I think, better than food can express the relational connection between country and town. Food is at the core of a social, intimate relationship among humans, as well as is at the base of the relation among human and non-human living forms. It's an important builder, vehicle of a cultural identity and social cohesion around food. Knowledge of the locality and the territory has been developed in rural communities, especially in the Mediterranean regions, where the countryside has always been seen as a productive rather than recreational countryside. As Caroline Steele well argued in her book, The Hungry City, since historical time, food and the relation to countryside have characterized the development of the city. But in the industrial society, food has become invisible to the city. The citizen consumers do not know where food comes from, how it is processed, how it is produced. In the new century, it was a task of the new social movements on local food to show how food is not an exclusive rural concern. They made manifest the absurdity of the puzzling omission of food from the city and urban planning. It's not only a matter of underlying the significance of urban agriculture and novel forms of food production, but more urgently, for the sake of a planet and human health, a way to overcome socio-spatial inequality, a matter of reestablishing healthy, symbiotic relations between country and town, consumers and producers of food, human and non-human living beings. But let's look at the future. It's a balanced relation, symbiotic relation between country and town still possible. And will it be possible in the future? New challenges face the rural places and rural planning. Sociologists and geographers speak of a planetary urbanization, urban age, that seem to erode rural spaces and cultures. Since 2007, more than half the population lives in cities and towns. The percentages The percentage has grown to 55% in 2018, and this is prospected to grow up to 68% by 2050. In this new urbanized world, what is the future of rural places? The corollary of planetary urbanization is, of course, rural depopulation. Do we have to think of the countryside as places where the people are disappearing from, places reclaimed for rewilding, designated to be a human-free natural reserve, as E.O. Wilson imagined and proposed in Half a Planet? It's in the increasing trend toward urbanization and rural depopulation, many new functions are attributed to rural areas. Here you have a recent list of this new function: the rural as a playground, as a dumping ground, a post-carbon landscape, a resource sink, a cultural heritage repository, food basket, a provider of ecosystem services, a social spaces. The problem with this list is that most of the functions are thought of in the service of the city and the urbanized world. In the tradition of Mediterranean agrarian rural culture, I think to meet a growing food demand from a growing population, to combat climate change, and to ensure food security, we have to work for and build vibrant rural economies connected to urban areas through regional economies. And this requires, for planning theory and practice, to engage proactively with the rural regions and localities, and not simply cast these places as residual. Rural places can be revitalized in a post-carbon society where rural still matters, and not only as a resource base, as food basket, beautiful landscape, or any other function in support of the city. It matters because rural places can support sustainable lifestyles, be enabled through policies and rural planning as a social spaces where people can interact while building a territorial identity, mainly through food with a territorial identity. In the last decades, local food movements have reclaimed the quality of food linked to the territory in the name of civic, environmental, and social justice values as a way to strengthen environmental sustainability and community relations. Food is mobilized in many dynamics of rural development that engender new market relationships, for example. For example, value-based territorial food network, nested market, rural tourism, that strengthen local territorial economies through synergies between economic sector, agriculture, industry, service, valorize new symbiotic country-town relationship through ecological and food identities, stimulate new forms of a bottom-up governance and institutional support. Let's think to the Food Policy Council, favor the exchange of knowledge and empower territorial-based local communities. So finally, food with a territorial identity is able to link agriculture plus special quality products, plus local knowledge, culture, experience, and tourism in a relation that is beyond the separation of urbanity and rurality. As Brodel wrote, town and country never separate like oil and water. They are at the same time separate, yet drawn together, divided, yet combined. I think that the string project's results will show how this relation works, and this is strengthened through food and gourmet shops. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Quite spot on in terms of time, so thank you so much. I know that Elisabete is going to need a little bit more time, so because she's now going to show the results of the strings, so it's quite a lot of stuff over the last years. So Elisabete Figueiredo from Universidade of Aveiro. The screen is yours.
Thank you. So thank you, Apostolos and Maria to bridging your presentation with the results of the Strings project. Good morning, bom dia a todos e a todas. As Mónica just said, I'm here to present some of the main results of the research project within which this conference is organized, the Strings project. This project was rooted in the many changes that many rural areas, mainly in the peripheral regions, Portugal included, faced since some decades ago. These changes are mainly related with changes in agricultural activities, and due to these changes, rural territories in Portugal and in other many places are facing some important challenges related to the decline of agriculture, the decline of population, aging processes, the deterioration of the social and economic fabrics, and the consolidation of the long-lasting asymmetries, at least in Portugal, between, but I believe in many other countries, between rural and urban territories. And all these changes resulted in major reconfiguration processes, both for rural territories and for the connections that may be established with the urban context. So all these changes also contribute to reconfiguring rural territories, which have been mainly transformed from places of production into places, into multifunctional places, specially oriented to consumption activities and specially oriented to urban populations. Amongst these activities, tourism-related ones and also the production and commercialization of local or traditional food products have an important part. And this matches the growing interest of consumers in this type of products, and also the increasing number of retailers interested in selling these products. So despite the contribution that these dynamics may have in rural territories and in the agricultural activities development, and also in fostering these rural-urban connections, not many studies have been conducted on these topics, especially from the point of view, or taking first the point of view of the retailer. So Strings intended to fill this gap and to shed some light on these relatively overlooked processes. To do this, the project was organized in 4 stages, 4 levels, and 8 tasks, being the first 3 levels and the first 6 tasks devoted to the collection and to the analysis of data collected from to answer several questions. The first one: who are selling these products in the urban areas? Why and how they are selling it? To whom? And from whom and from where are these products coming from? So to answer these questions, at first, we tried to build a typology of urban specialty shops through a survey directed to a previously identified universe of 194 shops from 3 cities in Portugal: Aveiro, Lisbon, and Porto. We obtained 113 valid answers. Regarding the second question and the second level of analysis, and based on hierarchical cluster analysis of the answers in of the questionnaire in the first level, that I will talk a bit later. So regarding the second question, we make a selection of 30 of these shops based on the cluster and the city. And then we interviewed the owners of these shops. We analyzed the promotional materials issued by these shops regarding the rural provenance food products they sell. We collect 7,491 text and image files that were analyzed using through content analysis, using NVivo to do this task. Regarding the question to whom these products are being sold, in these 30 shops, we surveyed the customers and the consumers, and we obtained 1,553 valid answers. Regarding the last question, from whom and from where these products are coming from into the cities, we finally select 9 shops as case studies, and these shops were contacted in order to give us a list of producers and distributors. We also surveyed these producers and distributors. We obtained 104 valid answers from the producers and 40 valid answers from the distributors. So in terms of the main results of the project, I believe they show some of the trends Apostolos and Maria were just talking about. But as you can imagine, it is rather difficult to me to present briefly these results here, because we analyzed, as you can see, several dimensions and sub-dimensions inside these dimensions, but I will try my best. To sum up some of the main results, and I will start with the shops analyzed in the first level. Based on so these are the shops from Porto, Aveiro, and Lisbon. These are the location of the shops, and an interesting aspect of these shops is that the majority of them was founded after 2010. So they are quite recently for the major part of the shops. In fact, 81% of the shops in Aveiro were founded after 2010, 68% of the shops in Lisbon as well, and 58% in Porto. So these little maps show us the growing of the shops during time, and they show different patterns of growth and implementation within the 3 cities that are, of course, related with the very configuration of the cities, the demographic patterns, and the tourism, population, housing, and urban expansion, in a word, in each of the cities analyzed. Also, it is interesting to note that mainly in Aveiro and in Porto, these shops seem to value proximity when it comes to source the products they sell. Also in Lisbon, we can see this trend, but in the shops in Lisbon more often sell products from all the Portuguese territory. As I said before, we conducted a hierarchical cluster analysis based on the question about the most sold rural provenance Portuguese food products, and we identify 3 clusters of shops: the wine focus, the rural provenance focus, and the generalist. Regarding the wine focus, this is the smallest cluster. As the designation indicates, they sell mainly wine. These are the shops more likely to sell products from multiple regions within the country and to source the products from distributors. The rural provenance focus, as also the name indicates, they are focused on the provenance of the products they sell. These are shops that are more likely to selling products from one single region, and also to buy the products directly from the producers and to be family enterprises. The generalist shops, they constitute the larger cluster. The shops included in this cluster are the ones that sell vegetables and derivatives such as olive oil, but also non-food products such as cosmetics, hygiene products. They source the products from a diversity of regions, and also, as in the second cluster, they tend to source these products directly from the producers. And these are the shops in which we found more products with certification labels, mainly organic labels. As I said before, in the second level of analysis and based on these hierarchy, on these clusters, and also on the distribution of the shops by city, we selected 30 cases, 30 shops to be further analyzed. And the data from the interview, of course, it demonstrates more or less the same characteristics I already mentioned for the global universe of shops. But these shops sell mainly cheese, wine, and vegetables. And regarding the motivations of the owners of the shops to sell rural provenance food products, Portuguese rural food products, it has to do with the differentiated character and exclusive character of the products, their traditional appeal, their healthier character, and their provenance. And the motivations related to the shops are more connected to the desire to provide a personalized customer service, to establish trustworthy and closer connections with the customers, and also to bring these products from the rural into the very heart of the cities, into the city centers. These motivations, both to both sell this type of products and to open these kind of shops, are also related to the perceived distinctive elements of the shops. And education and passion for these products is one of them. These closer relationships, both with consumers or customers and with the producers, and the variety of the services provided are the more often perceived elements of these shops. And in fact, they provide a large variety of services to customers, as we can see here in this table. Then it is true that these shops also face some challenges. The more important ones are the difficulties in competing with supermarkets and other larger selling venues. Also, the lack of government support to traditional commerce and the cost of the rents in the city center are the main challenges and the main constraints these shops are facing. Regarding the ways in which these shops are promoting this rural provenance food, we analyzed thousands, as I said, of promotional materials, mainly collected from Facebook and Instagram posts, website publications, and also printed materials available at the shops. And we observed from the content analysis of these materials a greater and expected emphasis in the type of the products, of course, in their characteristics and in their geographic origin and in the producer. Wine is, before that, certification labels are the least emphasized aspect in the promotion. This is an interesting result. Wine is the product more often promoted with more references, followed by vegetables, and olive oil. The characteristics of the products more often referred to in these promotional materials are the physical and tangible attributes, such as the logo, the brand, the color, the appearance, but also the sensorial attributes such as taste, flavor, appearance, again, the scent. And regarding the symbolic features of these products that are emphasized in the promotion, we find a greater emphasis in the health and environmental aspects of these products, also on the status, on the excellence of these products, and also in the authenticity and typicity of these products. The regions of origin, more often advertised in these promotional materials, are regarding the whole country, the north and center region. We can find, I'm not going to explain that, but we can find, if you look at these little maps here, we can find some differences in the promotion of the products by city and also by cluster. So here by city, we can see again this proximity pattern I already referred. And regarding the cluster of in which the shops are included, we can see here that some regions are more referred to than others according to the products these shops are selling. Also in the promotional materials and regarding these the producers and the way they are advertised, they are promoted in these materials, its agroecological character and its dedication, its passion, its love for farming and for this type of products are the main characteristics emphasized. And regarding the ways of production, the traditional, the artisanal and organic character of the productions are also the main aspects emphasized in the promotional materials. Regarding the consumers, also the customers of these 30 shops, also analyzed in second level, we can say that, sorry, I will pass this. We can say that the majority, more exactly 75.5% of our respondents are Portuguese, living in Portuguese cities. 68.1 lives in predominantly urban areas in Portugal, and they are mainly from the north, the center, and the Lisbon regions of the country. And 24.3% of our respondents are non-Portuguese. They are from several countries, as we can see here, mainly from European countries, but also from Brazil and Angola, for instance. In terms of their social demographic characteristics, we can see here that in our sample, we have this balance between male and females. Respondents are relatively young, between 31 and 40 years. The majority has a higher education level and are professional active, and with a monthly household income not very high, between 600 and 1,000 euros. The customers of these shops, they have quite positive images about rural territories and about the products they buy from the shops. We see here a greater emphasis on very idyllic characteristics of rural, like the well-being, the tranquility, the quietness, but also on the environment and natural elements. And regarding the products, apart from referring to products, to specific products, we see here that quality is the main aspect emphasized by these by the respondents regarding the food products. 76.1% of our sample consume rural provenance foods in a regular basis. The products more often bought from these shops are wine, cheese, olive oil, alheira, which is a kind of typical sausage here in Portugal, and also vegetables. And the main regions of origin of the products bought are again the north and the central parts of the country. Regarding the reasons, the criteria to choose to buy and to consume as well Portuguese rural food products, we can see here that the sensorial aspects of these products are the most important reasons. Things like their appearance, their taste, and their fresh character. But also, it is very important, the national character, the Portuguese character, and the local character, and the rural character, the Portuguese rural character of these products is an important determinant of choice as well. And also the convenience and the rich factors, such as the fair price, the trust in the store, and in the specialized services the store provides, and the availability of these products in the residence area of the respondents. We find out that the very important predictor of the consumption of these rural provenance food products is the connections the respondents have with rural territories. So 50.4% of our sample have relatives living in these areas, and from these 66.3% of these of the respondents have relatives who are farmers, and from these 79.4% consume food products produced by their relatives. Additionally, as we can also see here, 60.7% of our sample have visited Portuguese rural areas in the last 3 years, and from these, almost 50% have visited these areas just to taste local gastronomy and wines, and also, although with a lower percentage, they have visited these areas to buy food products. And these results point out these long-lasting connection between the Portuguese population mainly and our rural territories. Portugal had quite recent deruralization process, and of course, I would say the majority of the Portuguese population still has these strong ties that manifest in many ways, and also through food, with these rural territories. Finally, regarding the producers and the distributors of rural provenance foods, so the third level of analysis of the project that sell their products to the urban specialty shops, we can characterize the producers mainly by the majority of these producers are male. They are relatively young, between 41 to 50 years old. 43.3% have a degree in agricultural related, wine and food sciences related fields, but also administration, management, and law. And for the majority has a higher income, higher than 3,001 euros. I have to say these characteristics of the producers do not correspond to the wider picture of the national producers and the national farmers. These producers are younger, they have higher education levels and higher incomes, and this suggests that the producers producing this type of products are really different from the generality of our farmers, of our food producers, which is also interesting to note. The distributors, they share some characteristics with the producers. The majority is also male. They are also relatively young, between 41 and 50, and followed by 31 to 40. Also, an important percentage have a degree here, mainly in management and law, but also in agriculture, wine, and food sciences. And they also have a high income, higher than 3,001 euros. These producers are mainly located in the north and the central regions of the country. But as these maps show, they are selling their products to all the regions in the country, mainly to urban specialty shops, not only the ones we have analyzed, but to other shops in other municipalities, other cities than Aveiro, Lisbon, and Porto. This is common to producers and also distributors. And for the distributors also sell to other countries. In almost, as we can see here, they sell these the Portuguese rural food products to almost all the world, from Canada to New Zealand, although they mainly sell these products to other European countries. The producers surveyed mainly, and the distributors, they mainly produce, our sample, they mainly produce wine, olive oil, and vegetables. The characteristics of their farms and their enterprises, they are mainly individual or family ones. These farms or these enterprises have between 21 and 50 years. They almost all the productions are to sell. The farmers in our sample, their farms range between 101 hectares and 500 hectares, but also followed by 21 to 50 and 1 to 5. So they are small to medium scale. The majority has been between 1 to 10 employees and often employed seasonal workers. The characteristics of distributors are not different from the ones of the producers. So the products are more or less the same. I'm almost finishing. Most enterprises have also between 21 and 50, and they have also more often between 1 and 20 workers. Regarding the perceptions, distributors and producers, perceptions or representations or images about rural territories, food products, and national agriculture, we can see here, although I'm not going into much detail, but we can see here that rural territories and food products are represented in a very positive light, while national agriculture is represented in using much more negative images, such as underdeveloped, poor, with lack of support, etc. So this is not quite surprising, but it is interesting to compare these. To finish this presentation,
Carlos Rodrigues, can you switch off your micro, please? Carlos. Elisabete, desculpa lá, podes switch off
o Carlos.
Sim, porque tu és a única que consegues fazer isto, nós não conseguimos.
Ok, já está. So to finish the presentation, finally, you may be thinking, regarding the motivations, the impacts, and the challenges related to the production and distribution activities perceived by both the producers and the distributors. In the case of the motivations to produce and to distribute these products, for producers, the main motivations are related to the stimulation, to the desire to stimulate, to contribute, to stimulate the production of these products, also to promote food sustainability and offer healthier food. So matching what are the concerns also of the consumers. And for distributors, the environmental aspects also have an important part, but they also emphasize as a main motivation the creation of jobs in the rural areas and in agriculture. Concerning the perceived impacts of the production and distribution activities, both categories of respondents, the producers and distributors, for both of them, these impacts or these perceived impacts are mainly related to the diversification of the productions at the local level, and the valorization of rural territories, through this diversification of productions, and also the impacts related to the increase of the demand of rural provenance food products. And concerning the challenges they identify, they are mainly for both of the categories of respondents, they are mainly related to the difficulties in predicting the demand, to the lack of financial incentives, and sorry, to the lack of public policies to support small to medium scale productions. And I will finish this presentation without a conclusion, because I think that we have already many things. But I will finish it with, sorry, besides coughing, with the strengths team, to which I would like to thank for contributing to the project, of course, and to make this conference possible. So thank you very much, muito obrigada. And if you wish to know more about the project, about our results, you can always visit our website. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Elisabete, for this very, very complete presentation of the results of the project. I mean, there is quite a lot of things, very, very encompassing. And I think that I was wondering if we have already a question. Apparently there is one that I have here at the chat. So it is from Adriano. Adriano, thank you so much for your question. So the question is, during the pandemic, there was a large movement of local consumption with movements such as Eat Local. Do you believe that the pandemic helped reconnect the population with local rural products? So I will address this question to the panel. So maybe we can start in order of the presenters. I don't know if Apostolos would like to comment, and then Maria, and then Elisabete. So this is the first question.
Thank you, Mónica. That's a very interesting question, actually. Drawing from our experience in Greece, Maria Fonte spoke about the Mediterranean rurality, and since all of the presenters are in the Mediterranean countries, we've got experienced similar trends. I think there is, I would say that in the Greek case, we have mixed signals. People during the pandemic increased, and we don't have very explicit data on that. It's from I would say, we haven't done a lot of research during the pandemic on these aspects, but we've got mixed signals. On the one hand, we've seen that the consumption of food during especially the lockdowns increased. I mean, different types of food, conventional food, but also the demand in more quality or local food was important. I cannot say, I'm not in position to say whether it was more important than the consumption of conventional food. I would say both types of food, the local and the conventional. There was an increase actually of food consumption during the pandemic in Greece. But we can also connect the fact that people, due to different reasons, and in the Greek case, it's connected also to the economic crisis, because in Greece, you know that the duration of the crisis was much larger than the other countries, nearly 8 years, 9 years long. So after the country went out of the one crisis, entered a second crisis, the pandemic crisis. So I would say that people during the pandemic retreated those who could do it in rural areas. And from that, I assume that people went there not only to feel more secure from the urban the danger of the COVID in urban areas, but also in order to enjoy a better better life, better well-being, including food, local food. So I would say that it's important but we need more research to have more to reply more with better certainty, with higher certainty on this question. But it's an interesting question that has bothered us a lot in Greece. Thank you.
Thank you, Apostolos. And Maria, would you like to say something?
Just, I also don't have data, empirical data to support what I'm saying, but except a few ones, because one student of mine has done a thesis on the topic. And what we found is that it's not that new initiative of a local food emerged during the COVID, but the one who were there were ready to respond, and they increased their selling a lot. The demand was much higher, so they increased a lot the selling of products. What is typical, I think, so I think it's not the COVID at the origin of the interest of a consumer on local food. It was previous, not to the pandemic. This interest was there before the pandemic, but the fact that there were an offer through alternative food networks of this product facilitated the consumers. I have to say that, for example, if you think farmers' market were forbidden during the pandemic. So there was a shift, for example, from farmers' market to the solidarity purchase groups. But what is specific of the pandemic is, I think, it's the emergence of solidarity initiative for providing food to people who could not afford it, no? Like, La Spesa Sospesa in Italy suspended people who was paying for the food shopping for other people, or people who went to collected and distributed food to poor families. This is maybe more typical.
Okay, thank you, Maria. I don't know if Elisabete would like to say something.
Yes.
Okay.
I think that I tend to agree to both Apostolos and Maria on this, especially regarding the lack of data we have concerning the consumption of this type of products and this more direct connection with the producers. But this is common sense, purely. But I think that there was an increase of consumers buying directly from the producers through these initiatives, like the from farm to the directly to the house of the people. But in the case of the shops we have analyzed that sell this type of products, during the pandemic, we know that some, not many, but some of these shops closed permanently, which may also be an indicator that people refrain a little bit to buy these maybe more expensive products, because in Portugal, as in Greece, as Apostolos just said, we just came out of one financial crisis to enter in the pandemic crisis, and many people experienced cuts on their incomes, and other people have lost their jobs. So I believe that the income to buy food, maybe they were consuming more food, but what type of food? So it would be interesting to explore more this aspects. And I don't know if Mónica, now I'm calling you to the discussion. I know that the Institute of Social Science have done some research about the changing habits of the people during the pandemic. And I don't know if you also studied these food habits. So maybe you have something more sustained with data to share. I don't know.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, I was going to mention something. We've conducted some surveys about a big survey, a large survey with lots of people online, but we captured different people. Though, of course, because it was online, the majority of the population were towards the higher educational levels. But it was quite an enormous amount of people, 1,000 people in one first phase, and then a second phase with 9,000 people. Mm-hmm. But it was most focusing on the family dynamics, all these issues about work-life balance, all these difficulties. There was a little bit about food, that people would speak freely about the topic of food. Major things were the transformative relationship with supermarkets, the risk perceptions, that food was something that was a bit more scare, and handling of food as well. Issues around the trust. There was lots of issues regarding the trusting the local food producers. So to prefer this kind of more close relationships with the producers, the digitalization of everything. So digital food experiences, eating with the screen, so to engage with the other family networks as well. So the screens, food in screens became very, very popular. But another thing that I would like to say is that now we are carrying out the third large survey on sustainability, where we are actually focusing on what kind of practices shifted and were configured with the pandemic. So then there is a focus on food in this survey. So, and also the environmental aspects of it. So one of our concerns is whether people started to become a little bit more, what were their relationship with nature? So whether there was any kind of reconfiguration of the relationship with nature. And what were the relationship with other people, with issues that Apostolos were talking about, the social justice aspects of it. One of the things that became very visible were the people that usually are invisibilized. They are kind of fades in the background of the food production, of the food transformation, like the migrant workers. There was some outbreaks of the pandemics in areas where they are very popular in Portugal for very large scale production of olive oil and of almonds, for instance. And suddenly these migrant workers became very visible because they were living together in very poor conditions. And so there are these kind of still very, very contrasting experiences of living in the countryside, of living in rural areas. We have a question, but I have a kind of a lingering question throughout the three talks. I paid, interesting attention to what Elisabete was saying about the importance of the sensorial, the organoleptic aspects of food, how that is so valued by consumers in the project that we have conducted. And Maria and Apostolos, they mentioned the importance of looking at the territory, having a kind of a more post-economic view, the importance of food also as a feature of relationality, of looking at the rural as a kind of a relationship and all that. But there was not much about this aspect, that it is a kind of an argument that Michael Carolan puts together on the embodied food politics, for instance, the importance of bodies, the importance of the senses, the importance of the sensory, of the taste. So my question is really, how important you think that bodies, the senses, the sensorial, the experiences, the embodied relationship with food, food is such a specific thing, how important it is also to frame a different way or a different model, different governance model to look at the relationship between rural areas and urban areas as a more integrative, as a more relational, as beyond the dichotomics. So this is, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of a provocative question, also because Elisabete mentioned so much the sensorial aspects of food. And then I'll go to the other question that I have here in the chat.
Maybe I can start.
Yes.
Well, it's very important. Actually, food is, I don't remember who said that, but somebody said food is not only consumed, it's incorporated. So more embodiment. The food is embodied in ourselves. But how does this element express itself, no, in the society and the economy, in the relation between country and side? I think one element, one very important result of the string is to underline familiarity, no? Familiarity with the people, most of the consumers who appreciated the characteristic of a rural provenance food had some familiarity with the rural area. So that means they know what is and they have a precise idea of what is good food that derives from their experience. The important question is how young people now who are in some way more separated than we were with the rural, how do they develop this sensorial knowledge of food? This is the big question. And I will not try to answer.
If I may react to what Mónica just said, and of course, Maria gave me the time to think a little bit more of the things I wanted to say. But what underlined my presentation was that when we speak about food networks, local food networks, of course, in much of the literature, what's left out is who is the producer and who is the actual producer. I don't mean always the farmer. Sometimes it's the migrants, are the women who do the food provisioning, are different types of people who are involved in the making of food at different domains. But I want to be provocative in that respect, saying that people who are from outside the local and either coming from the urban areas and they work in the rural local areas as food producers, farmers, as internal migrants, as internal movers, or people who come from the outside in terms of outside of the country as international migrants, they have their own food cultures, either urban or, I'll say, Bangladeshi food culture. And we've discovered in some of the local food production areas that they produce their own food, apart from the production of the food for the food system which is in place in the Greek rural areas. And they actually, in terms of food, of embodied food politics or food sensorial experiences, they are exposed to the local food, I mean, in terms of territorial food, but also to their own food. And the locals are not so much, the indigenous population, they're not so much trying to taste those people's food. So I think there is a complexity there in this embodied food politics and the sensorial aspect of food. I imagine that I gather that those people who come from urban areas and they have a different expectation in terms of food at the local area in which they are placed. So I would see more of a complexity, more of a racial. I wouldn't say racial. I would say different tribes of people in rural areas, and a higher divergence of of experiencing food in connection to the relations, of course, the social and economic relations which are in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a really, really good point. Very overlapping and complex. Elisabete, yes? I have a question here anyway, but yeah, go ahead.
These aspects that Apostolos were saying now, I have to say that I'm thinking about some of them for a long time now, because it is also from the symbolic, not only from the sensorial, but the symbolic point of view, this mixture between different practices of doing agriculture between the migrants and the local farmers. It's also very interesting, I think, because at the same time that we have all these certification labels that are meant to certify that this product is produced in a certain way from a certain place, the people who are producing these products are not national, and maybe or by sure they have some other agricultural practices that they integrate in the national ones. I don't know, but I find these questions also very interesting from the social and the political point of view, and the rural and the farming points of view. But regarding the sensorial features and how they are important to frame this, I think that these are something that could actually, with the right marketing and political maybe support, that can actually benefit some rural areas, because as we saw in the case of the customers we surveyed within the Strings project, many of them visited rural areas just or on purpose to taste local gastronomy and local foods. And maybe this is an aspect that could be developed in many places in Portugal and in Greece and in Italy and in other places, and maybe this already has been developed in other places, or even in Portugal in some villages. I'm not sure about it, but to provide to the tourists these experiences with food. So try the food in the place of production, and not in the urban areas, or not just in the urban areas. I think that this is something that could benefit rural areas and agricultural development in many places. But these sensorial aspects are in fact the ones that the consumers value the most, and the producers and the distributors, they also have this perception that consumers want to or they prefer these products because of this organoleptic, which is a very funny word, characteristics. So I think that playing with all these, maybe we can try to develop some touristic products, some touristic experiences in rural areas, taking advantage of these motivations to buy these products, the wish to taste, to feel, to experiment these products also with the senses. And well, they are already experienced with the senses, of course, but more in connection to the places of origin. So that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I have here a question by Maria Fonte to Elisabete, to the group, actually, to the project, which is this very interesting thing about the results about consumers' income. So the Strings results seem to contradict the idea that quality food is only for high-income people, because we got in our sample of consumers, you know, so a significant part of our consumers that were 1,600 to 1,000 euros from what I recall. So Elisabete, how can we answer this? Is it the survey, the sample? Is it something else? We cannot hear you.
Yeah, maybe it is the survey, the characteristics of the survey of our sample, because that I didn't say it, but the second, I think the second or the third most frequent income is above 3,000 euros. So we have this majority. They are not the majority, they are more frequently the customers have these 600 to 1,000 euros. But you see, 600 and something is the minimum wage in Portugal, and 1,000 is like the average wage in Portugal. Well, besides, it could be some characteristics of this particular sample, but it can also be that people, as you know, tend to lie a bit when it comes to reveal the income to the researcher. So I'm sure that all of us already experiment this, that people don't tell the truth or completely the truth when they tell us the income, their income or the household income. But anyway, apart from all that, I think that I talked a little bit about the availability, these shops making these products available in the city centers, but they also make them available to all types of consumers. So I think these products, they have several prices, and the shops, they are quite different from one another. Some of these shops are, I would say, popular, how do you say, mercearias, popular delicatessen? No, I don't know.
Small grocery shops?
Yes, small grocery shops that exist since many decades ago, and they have a neighborhood clientele. This happened mainly in Lisbon or also in Porto, but mainly in Lisbon, for instance. And I believe these shops, they sell these products not at this so higher prices, because they have this relationship, a long relationship with their customers, while we have in our sample other shops that are rather specialized in some of these products, like olive oil or cheese. And they present these products like an exclusive products with status. And in these shops, the prices are, of course, higher than in these neighborhood small shops, I believe. So we found all these different things. And of course, it would be interesting to cross the income of the customers and the type of shops in which they were surveyed, also to see if what I am saying is the truth or not. So thank you, Maria, for this question, because now we can further explore this type of this data. So, but the explanation may be a combination of all these things, I believe.
Okay, I don't think that I have more questions here in the chat, but anyway, I mean, I would be here forever, really, just talking to this amazing panel, because there's really, really interesting some of the questions that were brought about these multi-layered relationships with food in the local areas where migrants are there. I know that in some places in Portugal, they are opening their own food shops or even restaurants, small restaurants. And actually the locals, they don't go there. So there is a kind of sometimes there is this kind of a food backlash or food resistance, which is interesting because many times these are food from Nepal or food from India that has such a cosmopolitan, distinctive flavor that is very valued in the cities, in very nice posh restaurants or even common restaurants. And yet in those rural areas, it could be a place of contestation and a place of like Apostolos was saying, the kind of racial or discrimination, which is really interesting how food is positioned in such a completely different ways in rural area. In the very same rural areas, there are different layers of how people relate with the local food. So I think that I will, I don't know if you have final comments, but I was planning to finish this session, and also thank you so much for the 3 speakers, and also the question that we got from the audience, and we will go for lunch, I think, and then we will resume. We'll come back at 2 o'clock.
So talking this much about food, now we deserve to have some food.
Yes, lunchtime.
And we will be back at 2 o'clock for the parallel sessions. And let me just say that at 3:15, we will have the chef demonstrating the use of some Portuguese products. So I think it will be interesting. So if you could be there, please be there. And let me also thank Maria and Apostolos for their kindness in participating in this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.